what we've done in our politics is create a situation where we're electing idiots. And so I don't look at it through the lens of like, you know, is this what I should do or what I shouldn't do? I look at it through the lens of how do we elect serious people? And I think electing serious people can't be partisan.
Channel is Tony Doughty, 24/7 Eyes. It's early Friday morning. I'm 100% confident, by the way, you've been to a car wash at some stage. Yeah, bring the car through dirty and it comes out clean. But at the end of it, it is still a car. It's still your same vehicle. The reason I say that is because I've got to be very careful that I don't automatically turn this on here. Is it would appear that the Republican Party in the House are attempting to, well, clean the car again, as in replace the speaker. You know, sometimes when you find out the truth, I just need 60 seconds of your time to tell you something. When I was growing up, there was a series on TV called The Mr. Men. We need to add a new character, Mr. Desperate. Mike Johnson is beyond desperate. He's the sort of person that needs likes, needs retweets, all of that social media stuff that boosts his ego.
The story of Mike Johnson is a story of a collaborator.
Is nothing there. He is like the most insecure politician you can imagine, where he even has to bring along Elise Stefanik to butter his backside. His policies are here, there and everywhere. He says whatever he thinks he needs to get the attention of the former guys. Plays any card, has a black son.
My wife Kelly and I, when we were newlyweds, we took custody of a young black kid in Baton Rouge. We were living there. Michael, he's our son, and he
hates homosexuals, plays the religious card. You tell me right now, in one sentence, one word, sum up Mike Johnson. Oh, that one's easy. FOS. We have a better description. After a long time, I'm just sure a car's not coming through. Kevin McCarthy eventually became, as you know, Speaker. But that lasted for a while because Matt Gaetz and co. had enough. Not that they wanted him in there in the first place. It then turned into a little bit of a circus. You know, they were trying to... well, McCarthy got replaced. But it took a while to replace McCarthy. At one stage, they were even trying to bring Jim Jordan through the car wash. That is how crazy it got. Anyway, it eventually, this is what happened eventually, ended up with Speaker Johnson, right? And Speaker Johnson basically got, well, he's being brushed at the moment. He's being brushed and hoovered, and it may well turn out, because right now there is plans to, believe it or not, I feel like I should do a little song and dance here, go right back to the car wash, yeah, and go again.
Have you ever seen any Congress run as badly as this Republican House over the past year and a half?
No, I haven't. No, in the 35 years I have been there.
Yeah.
It's pretty terrible.
If Speaker Johnson doesn't deliver on the conservative credentials that he promised us, then I suspect we will be looking for a new speaker. That's always an option, but that was a rule that was put in place many years ago. It's been voted on and it's been approved by this Congress. So, yeah, that is an option. If we don't like our boss, or we don't like the person that's in charge, we have the ability to remove them.
Texas Republican Chip Roy, who's even raised the possibility of a motion to vacate the House speakership. Yes, to unseat his own new Republican Speaker Mike Johnson, a guy who took over after far-right Republicans ousted his predecessor, Kevin McCarthy, for basically the exact same thing.
That is crazy. They are seriously thinking of replacing the Speaker again. I'm not exactly sure why Johnson and Gaetz and co. are upset. Sounds a bit, I don't know, just internal stuff. But here is the serious situation. While that is, let's just place this down for a while. Okay, while that is all going on is, where is the... Jasmine Crockett summed it up so well, and Jamie Raskin. While all that nonsense is going on, where is the leadership?
Speaker Johnson, a lot of conservatives
Let me tell you what's going on. We're having thoughtful conversations about funding options and priorities. We had a cross-section of members in today. We'll continue having cross-sections of members in. And while those conversations are going on, I've made no commitment. So if you hear otherwise, it's just simply not true. We're looking forward to those conversations.
Are you open to
no more questions, guys?
Yeah, Nancy Pelosi, it's a bit cold. It's my son's hat, it's a bit cold. Nancy Pelosi summed it up. This is just chaotic. And there may even be like a shutdown Where is the leadership, the kind of the government? There has to be some level of... Right now, for example, if you were to go through the history of the House, where would you rate this current setup? And this is the Republicans are in charge. They can't suddenly say, oh, wow, this is the Democrats. Look what the Democrats did when they had the House. The Republicans have the House right now.
The rest of it, Biden's regime basically shuts itself down.
No, if I'm Speaker of the House, I finish the job in the House.
It's crazy. I mean, it's not even a song and dance. It is just one big mess. And I do not know how, I'll be really, really serious, all right? I do not know, where did I leave my sign? I do not know how they think suddenly, let me grab my sign, I'll take my sign with me wherever I go. I don't know how they suddenly think going into the car wash, I just hope it doesn't automatically turn on while I'm here, how they think going into the car wash is going to help them pull them all over your eyes, maybe. You know, if they change the leadership, that will mean everything will change. No, car comes out, make it clean for a while, but it's still going to get muddy. It's still going to be exactly the same vehicle.
Cobble together deal to keep the government lights on and avoid a shutdown later this month and, of course, into next month. Are we going through a Kevin McCarthy thing all over again here?
We're not quite there yet. It was interesting that Chip Roy, the Republican from Texas, told my colleague Aisha Hosni yesterday. He said he wasn't sure what would trigger this. He wasn't willing to go there. I spoke earlier today with Warren Davidson, Republican from Ohio, who indicated that the vote for Johnson as Speaker was one of the worst votes he's ever taken in his 4 terms here in Congress. Now, they have to fund the government by the end of next week. He is getting an earful. Today, Republicans blocked the House from even considering unrelated bills. This was a protest by the Freedom Caucus over the deal that Mike Johnson cut with Democrats.
Thank you, my friend, very much. Chad.
So there will come a time, believe it or not, where the vehicle perhaps has to be changed. Because just look, for example, this week, Jim Jordan had one of his House hearings. What the heck was that all about? Nancy Mace screaming and shouting.
Moments for Republicans, or my top 3. Nancy Mace in general, just embarrassing, screaming about white privilege, saying he's afraid of me. He showed up, he's sitting there, swear him in, let him talk. Then people like Scott Perry, Jim Jordan, people who are in the midst of defying subpoenas themselves, just sitting there railing about how important it is. And then you said Hunter Biden got bored and he left. He intentionally embarrassed Marjorie Taylor Greene, who held up, again, another poster of his genitals. The woman is obsessed.
I want to say, number one, as the former ranking member of the Civil Rights Subcommittee under Chairman Raskin last session, I take great pride as a white female Republican to address the inadequacies in our country. I come from a district where rich and poor is literally black and white, black versus white on most days.
It was a very beautiful speech by the gentlelady who, as she mentioned, was helped lead on the now majority side, the Civil Rights and Civil Liberties Subcommittee. But I think it's so exemplary of the point that she also oversaw the elimination of the Civil Rights Subcommittee on this committee, which really kind of gives the whole game away. We show up, we give speeches, we give flowery words, but at the end of the day, participate in the structural erosion of the rights and representation of people that are marginalized, women, people of color, people that just need to see their due process and civil liberties protected in this country. But I will move on.
Marjorie Taylor Greene just gesticulated, and it's the same garbage they're trying to do, this Hunter Biden thing. Let's impeach. In fact, I have a better suggestion. This is probably the best suggestion for all of this, of what can actually happen, okay? Forget the car wash, put it in, there we are, put it in the dumper truck, right now. There we go. That is the answer. That's where perhaps Jim Jordan and co. should end up. Anyway, I'd love to know your thoughts in terms of what is going on. How do you rate Jim Jordan, James Comer, and the rest of them? Because you would actually think that Hakeem Jeffries is the kind of, the speaker, because there you see maturity, there you see leadership, there you see calm, and there you see actual policies being discussed and looked at? Please leave a comment in the comment section below. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So we love the Constitution today, and we also want to talk about foreign money coming in. Have y'all seen the report that was just produced where this chairman decided that he was going to block this committee from receiving additional information about y'all's guy, Trump, and all the money that he took? From what we did receive, we know that Trump got almost $6 million that we can account for, and we know that there's more there. From China specifically, we found almost $8 million total that he accepted from foreign governments while he was serving as the president of these United States. But we're concerned about the president's son who has not been involved in his administration. I just want to run it back, though, to the very beginning, because this is something that I just can't get over. I can't get over the gentle lady from South Carolina talking about white privilege. It was a spit in the face, at least of mine as a black woman, for you to talk about what white privilege looks like, especially from that side of the aisle. And let me quote your now ousted speaker and what he had to say about the Republican Party and y'all's lack of diversity. When you look at the Democrats, they actually look like America. When I look at my party, we look like the most restrictive country club in America. So let me tell you something. Y'all don't know what white privilege looks like, but I'm gonna show you a little bit of something. You see, you want to talk about a two-tier justice system, and this is the only time that y'all have ever referenced it, when this country has a history when it comes to black and brown folk of having two separate sets of rules. And right now what you want to do is have two separate sets of rules because Mr. Moskowitz offered y'all a fair situation. He said he would vote for Hunter to be held in contempt if y'all voted to hold all, even if you remove all of the members of Congress. There's still other people that y'all haven't decided that y'all have excuses for, but y'all don't want to hold them in contempt. But for some reason, it makes sense to hold Hunter Biden in contempt, who has tried to comply. And let me tell you why nobody wants to talk to y'all behind closed doors, because y'all lie. That's just the bottom line. You have done it thus far in this investigation. You have done it this far as it relates to this committee. In every single hearing, y'all spin, spin, spin. I don't know how y'all are still standing right now, because you should be quite dizzy from all the spinning that you're constantly doing when it comes to spinning the truth. You talk about free and fair elections, but you back a guy who we know tried to steal the election. And this isn't about what Democrats have to say. Let me remind you, for those of you that don't know how the justice system works, it's not a matter of the president went in and indicted Trump, but we are talking about grand juries. Grand juries are comprised of American citizens, and the people that have entered pleas of guilty that will be flipping on your leader in a minute, they are Republicans. I do want to point that out. And half of them were Republicans that were handpicked by Donald Trump himself. So, to be clear, whatever happens to your little leader, it's going to be because of the actions that he took. So you can talk all you want to about how January 6th was nonsense, but all of y'all were running at that time. Y'all were grabbing y'all's gas masks, and y'all were running to your offices because you didn't know if they were coming to kill you. You should have cared that somebody was there to protect you, but instead you want to play games because you found out that it was your leader that decided that he wanted to propagate an insurrection on our country. So don't tell me that you care about the Constitution, because you don't. All you care about is Trump getting reelected, and I'll yield the last of my time to my leader.
Back to votes, and we're not sure if a Republican-led set of bills that we want to pass this week will pass, because there's a bit of a rebellion. I know, surprising, right? Another rebellion. This time over the budget, right? I know, another big surprise. Now, there's a lot more detail to this, and I think I'm going to do a longer video at some point this week and actually bring you through the steps of how we budget up here. But fundamentally, you've got people who believe in a political reality that just doesn't exist, right? And that political reality consists of a fantasy where we want a bunch more elections and have control of the Senate and the White House. In that reality, you can extract a lot more things from the other side, but we don't live in that reality. We live in a reality where we have, like this month, like a two-seat majority in just one chamber. So you're not going to get a whole lot. And so the rebellion is against the deal that our new speaker struck with Democrats over the weekend, which is the exact same deal, more or less, slightly better than what McCarthy struck last year. Again, because the political realities didn't change, the circumstances didn't change, and the same people who believe in a fantasy world of a different political reality also didn't change. So here we are.
Now is a fight, and I want the Speaker to start fighting for us and fighting for the American people, which means we have to close the border.
It seems like you guys are sort of banging your heads against the wall with some of these folks.
I'm suffering. I've got traumatic brain injury from banging my head against the wall.
CNN's Manu Raju has the very latest. He's joining us now. Manu, you spoke with Speaker Johnson. What is he saying?
He's trying to appeal to those very same hardliners and say that, look, we have a narrow majority, a razor-thin majority, and we can only do what we can do given the fact that Democrats control the Senate. There's a Democrat in the White House. But that problem for him is that is precisely the argument that then Speaker McCarthy made to the same group of hardliners, ultimately cutting a spending deal, ultimately getting pushed out as Speaker in historic fashion, and then leaving Mike Johnson with having to deal with funding the government. Johnson essentially cutting a similar deal, almost the same deal that McCarthy himself cut last spring on funding levels. And that is what's causing all the problems at the moment. And when I caught up with Speaker Johnson, I asked him if he's concerned he's facing the same fate as Kevin McCarthy. Are you worried that one of these guys is going to make a move on you?
No, I'm not worried about that at all. I just met with all those guys. They're close friends of mine, and we agree on the principles. Look, I am a lifelong hardcore conservative. I want to get as many policy wins as we can. I want to advance the ball as far as we can. But the reality is we have a small majority. So in a situation like that, you're not going to get everything you want.
And the question is if that will be enough to appeal to those very same members. Those members of the House Freedom Caucus, a far-right bloc, right now are meeting with Speaker Johnson in his office, trying to figure out if there's a way to move ahead, because what they did yesterday is they took procedural steps to essentially sink what's known on Capitol Hill as a rule. And that essentially scuttles legislation moving forward on the floor. That is rarely done, but has been done with increased frequency in this Congress to protest majority when members are not happy with the way their leadership is dealing with things. At the moment, they're trying to figure out if there's any sort of accommodation from those very same members who essentially have stopped all legislation in its tracks. And of course, Kate, the big question, can they avoid a government shutdown by the end of next week? That is what Speaker Johnson is struggling to try to avoid. But can they avoid one, given the demands from the right flank for new border restrictions as well as deeper spending cuts? That is a big question in the days ahead here, Kate.
Yeah, and it's the comments from Speaker Johnson to you right then are eerily similar to what we would hear from Kevin McCarthy over and over again during the funding fight that eventually led to his ouster. It's good to see you, Manu.
By next week.
Speaker Mike Johnson trying to tamp down a conservative revolt as tensions flare with hard-right Republicans over his deal with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer to avoid a government shutdown next week.
He didn't go in with the strongest hand. And what I'm looking for now is a fighter.
I think it was a massive failure, and we had no input into the conversations.
Do you think Johnson cut a bad deal here with Schumer? I do.
This place is a joke.
Now trying to avoid the same fate as Kevin McCarthy, the first speaker ever ousted after he relied on Democrats to help keep the government open. Johnson and Schumer cut a deal over the holiday recess to fund federal agencies at an overall level of $1.66 trillion, similar to the deal McCarthy and the White House agreed to last May.
By the time we could even get back into D.C., he had negotiated the terms of our surrender on the issue.
Do you think he's up to the job?
I think the problem is we didn't do the right thing up front. So we focused on who should be the next speaker. We focused on a person.
In protest, 13 hardliners stalled action in the House this week. Now those members want Johnson to back away from his deal and seek even deeper cuts, while also imposing new immigration restrictions, moves that would almost certainly cause a shutdown.
I do not want to fund a government that's working against us.
There's a likelihood we could have a week or two short-term, shutdown.
Would you be okay with that?
I think if it's for a short period of time, yeah, that we get these appropriation bills done.
Johnson telling CNN he is not concerned about his job.
Are you worried that one of these guys is going to make a move on you?
No, I'm not worried about that at all. I am a lifelong hardcore conservative. I want to get as many policy wins as we can. But the reality is we have a small majority.
Indeed, many furious at the far right, saying Johnson's hands are tied with a razor-thin majority and with Democrats running the White House and the Senate. They say the deal includes spending cuts Republicans should tout.
Seems like you guys are sort of banging your heads against the wall with some of these folks.
I'm suffering. I've got traumatic brain injury from banging my head against the wall.
I'm not big fans of them, let's put it that way.
But the 8 Republicans who voted out McCarthy are offering no regrets.
Well, I mean, the former speaker wasn't someone you could trust. I trust Mike Johnson.
And right now, this negotiation in the House is really between defense hawks, members of the Republican Party who consider themselves defense hawks, and members of that far-right Freedom Caucus. They are negotiating how they can avoid a government shutdown by next week. There are several options that are on the table, but Wolf, if Mike Johnson decides to go a route that breaks from his deal with Chuck Schumer, almost certainly you can expect Democrats to reject that, which will raise real fears about a government shutdown. But if Johnson decides to side with Chuck Schumer's, those threats to oust him from the speakership will only intensify.
We're headed towards total anarchy. We are rapidly approaching a third world country.
How's that going to convince some of the members in your conference, like Chip Roy of Texas, who is threatening to kick Speaker Johnson out?
Well, I was one of the 8 prior to it, and Chip was not. So, I don't know what's in his heart, but it's a reality, and we have to look at it. If Speaker Johnson doesn't deliver on the conservative credentials that he promised us, then I suspect we will be looking for a new speaker. That's always an option, but that was a rule that was put in place many years ago. It's been voted on and it's been approved by this Congress. So, yeah, that is an option. If we don't like our boss, or we don't like the person that's in charge, we have the ability to remove them.
If that moves forward, if there's a potential shutdown, don't you think that'll hurt Republicans going into an election year?
I think we better stop worrying about political expediency, and we better start worrying about our country.
By the time we could even get back into D.C., he had negotiated the terms of our surrender.
I want the speaker to start fighting for us and fighting for the American people, which means we have to close the border.
You think the speaker's job is at risk?
The way this place operates, I think everybody's job is at risk. This place is a joke.
Wow. Manu joins us live from Capitol Hill. I mean, I don't know what's a more powerful statement, this place is a joke, or that Mike Johnson negotiated the terms of our surrender.
Yeah, I mean, we heard the same thing with Kevin McCarthy. And remember, Mike Johnson essentially cut the same spending deal that Kevin McCarthy did that led to his ouster. The government is facing a partial government shutdown by the end of next week. Johnson and Chuck Schumer reached a deal to set overall spending levels that those members are now revolting against. In fact, right now, those same members are in Mike Johnson's office trying to press him to change the terms of the agreement that he reached with Chuck Schumer. They came out optimistic that he would change the terms of that agreement. If he does do that, that would risk a government shutdown by next week. Now, when I caught up with the speaker about all of this, I asked him whether or not he's concerned his job is at risk. He said it's not. And he also urged his colleagues to recognize the narrowness of their majority. Yeah, I mean, are you worried that one of these guys is going to make a move on you?
No, I'm not worried about that at all. I just met with all those guys. They're close friends of mine, and we agree on the principles. Look, I am a lifelong hardcore conservative. I want to get as many policy wins as we can. I want to advance the ball as far as we can. But the reality is we have a small majority. So in a situation like that, you're not going to get everything you want. You get what you can get. And we've been trying to negotiate to make that happen, and we're going to continue. And we're going to keep the team together. It's just another day at the office.
And one of the big questions is whether or not Johnson would include tougher border restrictions, dealing with the migration crisis at the southern border, try to put new language, policy restrictions in a must-pass spending bill. That's what those hardliners are demanding. They're saying we should shut down the government if we don't get our way. Johnson has not gone that far. I asked him about that as well. He simply said all the options are currently on the table. They're reviewing all that. But Dana, if he does do that, once again, we could face a shutdown fight. If he doesn't go down that route, once again, we could face threats and calls for his ouster. Speaker Johnson recognizing that Kevin McCarthy's job wasn't easy. Now he's trying to make sure he can hang on to that gavel.
I was just thinking somewhere in Bakersfield, California, Kevin McCarthy is doing this, sitting back on his chair. Manu, thank you, as always, for your excellent reporting.
Thanks, Dana.
pass the appropriation bills. And then I tell Chuck Schumer in the Senate, it's your job now, buddy. You do your work, and then we'll talk. But right now, Mike Johnson is getting rolled in meeting after meeting after meeting. When he is talking to Jake Sullivan and Chuck Schumer every day and impressed with these Four Corners meetings, but he's not talking to me and other important members in our Republican conference at all about any of the negotiations and any of the plans and exactly what we want to see done. He's failing on the job. But the biggest red flag for me, Steve, right now that has me livid is this deal with Ukraine. This is a losing war. It is a losing issue. The American people do not support it. Our border security is not a negotiating tool for the Ukraine war that the Pentagon loves and Joe Biden loves and the Democrats love, and that these rhino neocon Republicans and Nikki Haley is frothing at the mouth over because her donors support it. No. Mike Johnson should not be going in there with Chuck Schumer and saying, oh, yeah, we're going to make this deal where 5,000 illegal aliens, not migrants, cross the border every damn day so you can get $60 billion over to Zelensky, the most corrupt president in the world right now, because Ukraine is not the 51st state. Every day Mike Johnson gets closer and closer to this deal, brings me closer and closer to vacating the chair because I have absolutely had it.
Some members of your conference who oppose the spending deal you reached with the Senate have talked about a motion to vacate. Chip Roy talked about it yesterday publicly. Tim Burchett has said that he's still pondering it. What do you say in response to those members, and are you concerned that you could lose your job over this deal as the last speaker did over the first CR?
No, look, I'm not concerned about that. We're leading. Chip Roy's one of my closest friends. We agree on almost everything in principle. What I've talked with him about is the reality of being in what is soon to be the smallest majority in the history of the Congress, except for one exception, I think, in 1917, according to my research. We have very difficult challenges, but we're going to advance the ball. We're going to advance our conservative principles, and we are going to demonstrate that we can govern well. And I'm going to keep trudging forward. Look, leadership is tough. You take a lot of criticism, but I am a hardline conservative. That's what they used to call me. I come from that camp. Chip and I agree on spending, that we've got to dramatically reduce it. And I have a long record as a legislator of trying to cut spending. And when I was chairman of RSC, we prepared budgets that would get us back to balance. So this is a very serious priority of mine. This, to me, this deal, this agreement, is a down payment on restoring us to fiscal sanity in this country. It's critically important. Remember, last week we crossed a dangerous threshold: $34 trillion in federal debt. $34 trillion. We borrow every 140 days, as Congressman Schweikert pointed out in our conference this morning. Every 140 days we have to borrow $1 trillion. Just think about that. The scale of this is incredible.
And distinguish, but you know what? Listen, I just like to make things plain. And I think that I made it very plain yesterday as to why no one in their right mind in his position would want to come in behind closed doors and trust them to be the upstanding members that we're used to having in Congress. These are the same Republicans that have ousted their speaker, who now has resigned. These are the same Republicans that can barely keep the government open. These are the same Republicans that haven't really passed any bills all session long. To try to do that at that time was just wrong, and it was really offensive, especially since we know that they have no interest in equity. They have no interest in looking out for anybody but old white men as it relates to the policies that they're pushing, whether it's pushing back on our freedoms as it relates to repro, whether it's supporting the lack of DEI, whether it's supporting getting rid of affirmative action. Don't talk to me about white privilege when this is what your party is up to.
I think you may have just given the definition of lip service. Thank you.